Chapter 15. The pessimists of Newkirk, Teague among them, were right. They were in for another winter storm that for a day and a half dropped ice so heavy they could hear tree limbs breaking off from their trunks, and they lay awake through the night, hoping none of the casualties would land on their homes. But February 19th turned out to be the sunniest birthday Teague could remember. It was a deceitful sunshine, of course, heating neither the ground nor the air above it. Yet the light reflecting from the layer of ice encasing every twig and blade of grass was like something out of Scheherazade's tales. He wondered briefly if heaven were made of ice then, and not the crystal that bedazzled the prophetic apostle, ice-cold and impenetrable to hold against the fires of hell. He'd expected he'd have to learn to be more like ice in that case, because unlike Annalee, he had few doubts about where he'd go when he died. Of course, none of these thoughts made it to the Warners' ears. Teague indulged them in their determination to celebrate his birthday, despite the oppressive darkness that their mourning attire brought to the house. They made him welcome to pie and milk, and presented him with a new suit, fitted for a body 10 pounds heavier than when he'd first come. The arrival of Mr. Logan on a belated condolence call that turned into a business meeting did much to dispel any good feelings Teague may have developed over the course of the day, until, over dinner, the newspaper man let slip in his plea for 5 more stories at Teague's price that a newspaper in Columbus was interested in running the articles, and had hinted at trying to steal him away from Newkirk. Teague could hardly wait for Logan to leave so he might be left alone with the wondrous visions of a job in the capital, and for an awful second he thought he would have to put off those visions longer when Dr. Warner offered Logan a bed for the night. But the moon was up, Ohio's cold had nothing on Logan's native New England winter, and Mrs. Logan slept horribly when he was gone from home. Just as he was about to mount his horse, Logan turned back to Warner. "Almost forgot," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. "I picked up your mail at the post office to save you a trip tomorrow. Don't worry, I didn't read any of it. I'm a newspaper man, but I do have some morals." Warner thanked him, and then retreated to his study after he'd ridden off. Teague followed the example and went to his room, smiling to himself all the while. He barely heard Annalee knock on his doorframe. "What are you grinning so about?" she asked. Teague's smile widened when he looked up at her from his desk chair. "I may just take that Columbus offer." Annalee looked as though she didn't know whether to smile back or not. "And leave Oakshade?" "Then I could begin to repay your father and live without being beholden to anybody. Of course," he spoke more to himself, "they'll probably want me to write more lies, but maybe I could persuade them to allow a little more truth." He shook his head at his luck. "Do you know what this means? Self-sufficiency. It's what I've wanted my whole life." Annalee held out an envelope to him. "I don't know if your mood can stand to be improved any more, but this came in the mail." It was from Johnson's Island. Teague tore open the seal. "He must have written for Christmas, but it got misdirected. At least he's not ignoring me like I thought. That's something." But as he read, his smile disappeared and was replaced with impassivity, though Teague wasn't especially aware of his facial movements, nor would he have cared even if he was. "Please leave," he said, all but pushing Annalee out of the door and locking it behind her. Sunday, 25 January 1863. Guillermo died this afternoon. I finished the translation, but he didn't live to sign it. I had to satisfy myself with forging the signature for him, using my left hand so that the blocked letters smeared into the merest hint of his name. I copy the letter here, as it reminds me of how I might once have addressed Mother were I in his place. Dearest Mamma, know that I am well in spirit, if not in body. The fighting of the past months has been the heaviest I have seen, and as a result I find myself in the hospital so many miles from you. I was in the fighting at Rappahannock Station, and lost my right arm. My friend here, Captain Scott, writes this letter for me while I learn to manipulate a pen in my left hand. Do not worry for the arm, Mamma. Like an old friend passed on, it and I shall join together one day, though we are so far apart now. For I am certain of that immortality which has been promised to those who believe on him and know the pains of this world will pass away. But, Mamma, the horrors I have seen with my eyes, yes, and have heard so clearly that I could see by imagining, these will not pass from my memory until that day. Have Papa tell you of the fighting in Italy, as he has told me. Increase their deeds 100-fold, and you will yet have glimpsed only the smallest fraction of what I have witnessed. Do you remember my confirmation, how you promised not to cry when I went up, but did anyway after Father Rossini anointed me? Do you remember that I did not wish you to hold me close to you there after Mass, because the neighbor boy had bet me a week's lunch that you would? I wish for nothing more now than your embrace. When my arm heals, I will come home to you. Pray for me, Mamma. Your ever faithful son, Guillermo. There will be wailing in that house. Mother would have been weeping by the end of the first couple of sentences, as doubtlessly I would have worded those sentiments very nearly as Guillermo did. Now? Mother, I lost my right leg at Antietam and am a sight to see on ice. I'm here at a hospital near a city you would not think worth looking up on a map, as it is too representative of Yankee ways. I've been expecting to die here for the last 3 months, came close more than once, but am presently still living. A man died today who called me a friend. I had to ask a nurse for his last name. Do you remember the morning I got baptized? I was 12 then, but you seemed to think it perfectly fine for me to go to the mourner's bench wailing for Jesus to save me. You were crying too. The pastor was crying, the whole deacon section was crying, a communion of misery rising up from the church. Why didn't I ask you then what I was thinking, when all that moaning and suffering might have made the answer seem more real? Why didn't I ask you then what burns my mind now? Why didn't I ask you what could possibly have possessed any son of man to want to save me, when he knew very well that not I nor any one of the people in that building would have done a thing in the world to save him?